this is not the nicest topic that I need to cover, and it does get a little bit technical. So let's talk about tuition fees to begin with. When parents are considering a school and they are evaluating what the school costs, one of the most important criteria is the tuition fees. However, the tuition fees are not the whole story when it comes to being able to afford private education in Hong Kong. Now, if you don't know, all of our international schools are private. And then there are some other schools that we work closely with that you might be interested in, which are not international, but they still are private. This does create a little bit of confusion amongst parents that I'm going to try and keep this simple. So, all schools are regulated by the Education Bureau. They are all subject to legislation. It's the Education Ordinance, and it's long and there's lots of different bits to it. But within the Education Ordinance, there is a section on fees. The Education Bureau, being the regulatory body for all of our private schools and non-private schools, regulate the fees. That's one of the major areas that they regulate. As parents, there is a useful document, which I can put the link to, and I've talked about this before, which is the fees certificate. Now, as parents, I would advise you to go and look at the fees certificate for the schools that you are interested in and make sure that what they publish on the website in terms of their tuition fees matches the fees certificate. Now, it normally does. It almost always does. That's not what I'm frustrated about. The tuition fees are subject to increase every single year, especially because they were frozen for a few years during COVID. So tuition fees increase every single year 2 to 9%. So you might want to calculate for the period that your child will be in school. However, I'm not too concerned about tuition fees. It's relatively transparent. The issue I have is that on that fees certificate, and I've got a little video where I show you how to find that fees certificate. But on that fees certificate, there are a few key sentences in the bottom, in the notes. Always read the small print. And it says that, I'm paraphrasing, but it basically says the schools are not allowed to charge any amount of money to the parents if that amount is not written on the fees certificate. Okay, that's what it said. The school was not allowed to charge anything else. They could charge what was written on the fee certificate, but that was all that they were allowed to charge. That's what it said. But that's not what was happening. For years, that was not what was happening. Schools were charging all sorts of fees in addition to what was printed on the fee certificate. For years. They were charging application fees. They were charging debentures. They were charging capital levies. They were charging all sorts of different fees that were not printed on the fee certificate. And they were not actually allowed to charge them. But apparently, nobody took any notice of this until about 2020. And in 2020, an ombudsman review was conducted. Usually the ombudsman reviews are, there's tip-off. They had enough complaints over a series of months or years that they eventually decided to investigate. And so investigate is what they did. And they published a report, which I can link to, which I've discussed in detail, that made some recommendations. Now, unfortunately, the ombudsman can only make recommendations. That's all they can do. And they're actually investigating the Education Bureau as the regulatory body and holding the Education Bureau to task, saying, actually, you haven't been doing this. You should be doing this, that, and the other. And so there have been some changes, but to me, these changes are not satisfactory. So the changes are that in addition to the amounts that are printed on the fees certificate, the schools now need to apply for approval for all these other amounts, be it application fees or debentures. Furthermore, they need to apply for approval to be able to charge these amounts outside of the regulation timeline, which, again, from memory, it states that you can't charge more than 30 days in advance. Now, all private schools, that's not feasible. Logistics does not allow them to be able to do that. So they also need then approval to be able to charge these deposits, capital levies, entry fees, debentures, months and months in advance. So that is what has been happening really recently. I want to say maybe in the last year. But here's again where I'm frustrated and there's no transparency. So we still have the fees certificate. We still have no confidence whatsoever that any of these additional fees are approved. We have to take the school's word for it that they're approved, which I don't find very satisfactory. Do you? Now I've been on this. I've been on a little bit of a project, shall we say. Many conversations with the Education Bureau. I've actually got to speak to a couple of really good people who really know what they're talking about, and they've escalated this to the policy division now because the fact is the schools now need to apply for approval. They need to get the approval. They then receive approval letters, and these approval letters are secret. Some schools consider them to be secret. They should be displayed. They should be available for parents to view. Now, I said I've been to about 3 or 4 schools in the last couple of weeks, and I've been having a look. Some of the schools are displaying these in reception, which is what they should be doing, which is what the EDB is recommending. So when you walk into your school, a little homework project, let's crowdsource this. Next time you go into the school that your children attend, have a look for the approval letters from the EDB that stipulate that they are approved to charge what they are charging. And these approval letters should be prominently displayed. I remember if the EDB says they should be displayed to parent. One school I visited has it in their office, so it's not accessible to parent. A couple of schools do have it in reception. So common sense tells us that it should be visible for the public to be able to check. Because here's my issue, that the schools are publishing fees on their website. Are we to assume that all of these fees are approved? I've been on this project for just a few days and I've only investigated 4 or 5 schools. I've already found one discrepancy. So that doesn't give me oodles and oodles of confidence. I don't know about you. But the process of trying to check every single school is the most frustrating, most laborious, most ridiculous process known to man, whereby the schools need to apply for approval. They need to get approval by way of a document, which we don't know if they have or not. And there's no way of knowing. We can physically walk into the school and see if they display it. Some don't. So this is the project that I'm on at the moment. Parents don't really question, right? You're being able to pay a lot of money, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. Are the schools legitimately approved to be able to charge these? And here's another thing that they do, especially at this time of year, because if they're confirming students for entry in 2024, what they will do is they will ask you to put down a deposit or a capital levy at the 2024 level, which they've applied for but is not yet approved. So actually, they're only supposed to charge you at the 23-24 level because that's what's approved. If they get the approval to do the increase in August, they can then charge you the difference, but they're not allowed to charge you that right here, right now. There was a school that got into trouble for that several years ago. Admin nightmare. I agree from the school's point of view, complete admin nightmare. So go into your school, check with the schools that you're applying to, but we need to be asking these questions and we need to be satisfied that these fees are approved. Because you know what will happen, like one of the kindergartens that closed down recently that was charging debenture, those parents are never going to see that debenture money again. Okay, the school's closing down because they're in financial difficulty. So where is all of that money that the parents paid several years ago? It's gone. Or it's, they're all needing to have approval for the application fees as well. Yeah, which is a good thing. It is progress. Don't get me wrong. They were all doing it. They were all charging. It was the Wild West. It still is. They charge whatever they want, basically. It's just that now they have to seek approval. And is this a rubber stamp job? Yes, probably, most likely. But at least we want to be confident that the schools have the approval, right? Don't we? Because also, to me, do I want to put my child into an institution, an organization in which their integrity is questionable because they're actually charging an amount that we're not sure if they're approved or not. Actually, just a little addendum to this. If you work in admissions, you are in the sales department. And if you don't understand this, you should. If you do not understand the ins and outs of what it costs for a parent to enroll in their school, so if you do such a fantastic job, you show them around and you do all of the communications, and you're in touch and you receive the application, then any questions about fees, I would hope that the admission staff would be on it and they would be able to answer. And I've been a little bit surprised at the lack of knowledge. Now, maybe they feel that this sits squarely with the finance department, but it doesn't. There needs to be some more, I think, a little bit more understanding. And I have to say also that the international schools have been having a series of meetings with the EDB where they get invited to these group meetings, they get briefed on this. But the private schools are slightly on the periphery of this, if you like.